Hi, hello. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Julia Dracon and I am the coordinator for the Local Resilience Forum, LLR Prepared. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for any inconvenience that might have been caused by the changing format of today's webinar, and I do hope that you are able to download the presentation that was available on the website and to be able to view that before this Q&A session around a discussion for preparing your families for emergencies. So the key points that were covered in the presentation were first of all around the kinds of scenarios that you could reasonably expect to affect your family and what you can do to be better prepared for such events. By preparing for such incidents, you can therefore minimise the disruption and concern that such events can cause. It is extremely unlikely that the scenarios that we covered in the presentation will affect you or your family individually, but it is pragmatic to plan for the fact that indeed it might. We now want to invite your questions, which you can send using the instant messaging facility. If you can see a box saying one new message, please click read to open up the dialog box if you haven't already done so. If you can't see that box, then please click the button on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, which has a speech bubble on it, and that should also open up the dialog box where you can type and send your questions. If you are having problems with either of those options, then please feel free to email us any questions that you might have, and our email address is emergency.management@leics.gov.uk. And we'll get back to you shortly after the webinar with any questions that you might have. So we have already had one question in about why mobiles might not work in a flooding situation. And there's two key reasons why that might be the case. One is that when there's an incident happening, a lot of mobiles trying to use phones in one particular close together geographical area can actually cause that cell to overload, and therefore messages won't be getting through. Additionally, mobile phones are reliant on power in order to be able to use the infrastructure that moves the messages through the system. While those arrangements do have a backup power facility within them, if the power cut goes on for any length of time, what we can actually see is that the mobile network may actually fall over. Again, this is an extreme circumstance and unlikely to happen, but one worth being aware of given the fact that we are increasingly reliant on mobile telecommunications as a way of communicating with our family and friends. One preparedness tip we would give you today is just being mindful that in a power cut, those cordless digital devices that you may use within your home to use a landline telephone, if you still have one of those, won't actually work in the event of a power cut. So a tip would be to keep an old school style phone available. One of the plug into the wall jobs is a very, very useful thing to have as a backup option. The second question that I can see on the screen is around any advice for pets or additional questions around pets. Excuse me while I just scroll up this question here. During the actual webinar presentation itself, we did talk a little bit about how you prepare for an evacuation with pets and some hints and tips around that, with the general principle being that if the pet is safe in the home and you're unlikely to be evacuated for any length of time, then actually being in that local, leaving them at home is actually the safest and best place for them to be and the least concerning for them individually. However, if there is a danger around the property and there is a need to evacuate the property immediately, then additional information can be found both on our website, so that's llrprepared.org.uk, or additionally the RSPCA has a wealth of information on its site as well, and that goes beyond pets in the home and actually talks about animals that you might be keeping away from the home, for example horses that might be living in fields that are potentially prone to flooding. The next question, do you think that emergency planning might make children fearful? Well, experience has shown, and this is worldwide now, that actually engaging children in preparedness arrangements for emergencies is actually something they respond to very well, and it enables them to be able to deal with the incident much better and be able to recover from it much quicker afterwards, because they're aware of what actually might happen. So over in the USA and in Australia, where natural disasters are far more prevalent than they are in the UK, they have a comprehensive programme around education for children to be prepared for emergencies. Within the UK, there is a scheme that the Scouting movement use, which is called the Duke of Cornwall Award, and locally during this week we are promoting with our local schools some emergency planning materials, very much focused on making children aware of the risks but not overly concerned about them, because we're being clear about what they can do now to help to prepare themselves and others in their family for an emergency. Okay, the next question. My dad can't get around like he used to, and he also has dementia. How would he be evacuated? That would very much depend on the nature of the reason for the evacuation. So there is a range of reasons why we'd be looking to evacuate people from their homes, and that could be from anything like the Melton Road fire that you saw at the beginning of the presentation that was available on the website, where that was very much a time-critical evacuation, where the emergency services were seeking to get people out of their homes into a safe place as quickly as they possibly could. An additional scenario might be something like the discovery of an unexploded World War II bomb, or a flood warning for an area that we were anticipating being significantly flooded in the upcoming time frame. That would obviously be a slower scale evacuation, where we as local authorities would be more able to identify known vulnerable people living in an area, or known associates or clients that we will be able to put in additional arrangements and support for in advance of an evacuation. In both scenarios, it is likely that evacuated people will be taken to an emergency centre, which would be run and staffed by the local authority for that area. And within that centre would be trained staff and volunteers who will be able to offer additional signposting, support and information to make sure that we are actually meeting individual needs. Okay. We seem to have reached the end of our questions.